Most woodworkers, like me, suffer from something called tool addiction syndrome, or TAS. It's a very common and serious condition that we face, which makes us constantly want to buy more and more tools, and even when we have the right tools, we want to upgrade them to bigger and better tools. Man, this table saw has been great. That $5,000 saw stop, though, does seem pretty cool, and it is $250 off. Maybe it's time to upgrade. Every now and then, it would really be nice to have a bigger jointer. Maybe it's time to upgrade. Wonder if I should upgrade to have two 17-inch bandsaws. I don't use this thing all that much. Wonder if I'd use it more if I had an 8x4 CNC. Maybe it's time to upgrade. But I want to tell you guys about what I think are upgrades that are much more important to make before any of these other upgrades to your shop. My name is Bob from Garage Dwellers Woodworking, and this video is all about the 3 upgrades that you need to make for your garage or small workshop right now. Now, as a disclaimer, there's lots of theories out there about what the most important upgrades for your shop are, and tools certainly play a part. For instance, if you're thinking of starting a wood shop, you should probably start with some tools. But a lot of us get to the point where we've got the basics. We have a table saw, maybe a little bandsaw, a miter saw. We either have the ability to mill wood in our own garage or buy it milled. And we get to a point where we start looking around and saying, I like my table saw, but maybe I could upgrade that. I want to talk about 3 different things that I think are important to upgrade, and quite honestly, probably more important than some of the tools that you're getting. Now, full disclaimer, it's important to start with some tools. So if you're wanting to start a wood shop, I wouldn't say that the upgrades I'm talking about are the first things you need to do. You need some equipment to start making things. However, there are definitely things that are more important than certain tools to upgrade. For instance, I think a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today is probably more important than getting a big planer, more important than getting something besides a small bandsaw, if you even need a bandsaw at all. There's a lot of tools that we all talk about and think about and want, and as you get more experience with your woodworking, you'll find that a lot of the tools you bought wind up sitting around collecting dust and you just don't use them all that much. But the stuff I'm going to talk to you about today, you will use every day. So let's talk about number 1. Now, the first big upgrade that I made in my shop, and I would advocate you upgrade first as well, is your lighting. You can't do work if you can't see well, and quite frankly, I've never been in a garage that has good lighting to start with. Most garages are going to rely on the garage door opener plus maybe 1 or 2 small light bulbs to light the entire space, and you just can't get work done this way. Whether you're trying to work on a fine detail, follow a line with a saw, or anything, you can't do your woodworking without being able to see it. Now, there are a whole bunch of different ways to go about this, and I'm going to show you what I did with my lighting. Now, when I started out, I had 2 very small 60-watt light bulbs and a garage door opener light that only turned on when you activated the garage door. Now, my garage itself is 20 by 22, and so that was not a lot of light, and basically anything except right under the light bulbs was really dark, and the stuff under the light bulbs was super dim. So for me, I started out with something super cheap. I didn't have a bunch of money to plunk into this at the time, and I wanted to get to work. You don't have to go to a company and have them evaluate for dark spots and make heat maps in your garage to get great lighting. So one of the things that you can buy for your shop are these adapters, and what these things do is basically turn your light outlet into a light socket. And of course, you could also just rewire everything to put outlets in your ceiling. What that allowed me to do was to install these LED lights. I bought these from Lowe's. You can find them anywhere, any home center, Amazon.com. These ones are LEDs. They're a bunch of years old, probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old at this point, and they could potentially do for an upgrade, but you basically want to make sure that you're getting good broad coverage all the way across the garage. Now for me, I have 6 of these in total. I split the garage into basically 4 sections and put 3 lights over where those sections intersected. And it has given me really good coverage. Now, whenever you choose lights, you're going to have to choose how warm or how cool they are. The cooler a light is, or the higher the K number that you see, you'll see up to 5,000 or 6,000 K. That's getting closer and closer to mimicking daylight. The warmer or softer a light is, or the lower number K, the more of like, think about like dimly lit indoor places. So for instance, in a garage shop, if you were to put 2700 K in there and it was nighttime, it would still be a little bit dim. For me, I went with the highest K that I could get for these so that I could get as close to daylight as possible. I did this for a few reasons. Number one, I just like the daylight look. That works the best for me. Number two, it helps with filming. I like having good lighting so that I can film in here. But think about what you want and what your eyes work with best. Most woodworkers that I know go with a 5,000, 6,000 K LED light so they can get a nice, bright daylight effect. Especially if you don't have windows with natural light, you're definitely going to want to upgrade the lighting in your shop. So, lighting, of course, is number one. The number two thing that I would highly recommend that you upgrade in your shop is your electricity. Now, like most of you guys, almost every garage that I've ever been into, and mine included, started out with a single 15 amp circuit. That meant everything in here, every electrical outlet, and every light in here was connected to one single outlet. So what did that mean? Well, if I was trying to have lights on, run my shop vac and my contractor table saw, I would frequently trip the breaker. Now, if you watch a lot of garage woodworkers on YouTube, you will see this as a constant complaint, tripping your breaker, having to reset it. For me, it involved walking into the house, downstairs into the farthest corner that I could get to, resetting that breaker and coming back up. There were even times where if I was working during the daytime, I would open the two windows that I have and turn the lights off, just hoping to save a little bit of amperage so that I wouldn't trip that breaker, but inevitably it tripped constantly. And the reason for that is this: aside from some of the smallest tools, a lot of the tools that you are going to use in woodworking are going to need at least a 20 amp breaker. Now, a lot of them operate under 15 amps, but if you think about it, everything that you're adding on to that is pushing you closer and closer to that threshold. And if you have a tool like, let's say, a miter saw, and you're running 13 amps and you're trying to chop through a thick, dense wood, it's going to drive up the need for electricity. That's when you trip your breaker. Now, there's lots of folks who get away with just having the one circuit, and I may do for a while, but at some point you're going to need to upgrade. Especially when you start to upgrade tools. Most woodworking tools that are of really high quality recommend a 20 amp breaker if you're on a 120 system. When you start getting into even bigger tools, such as my 15-inch planer, my bandsaw, or my joiner, those tools require 220 power. Now we're talking about even more power needs that nobody's got just starting out in their garage for the most part. Now, I worked my way around this for years. I even purchased the Makita battery-powered miter saw specifically so that I didn't have to use electrical outlet power while I was running my miter saw. But it got to the point where I just needed to upgrade. Now, this can be a big deal, and I did not do this personally, and quite frankly, unless you are experienced with this or are an electrician yourself, I would really highly recommend that you get an electrician to come out and do this work for you. They know the codes, they know how to do things correctly, and for me, I'm not tremendously comfortable playing around with electricity. Now, I wound up having a small sub panel that was run up from my main panel all the way up to the garage. You can see I went with a lot of conduit, and this is something that's really a great cost saver. You don't have to drill a bunch of holes in your wall to try to run all this stuff through. It's a garage workshop. There's nothing wrong with having conduit being exposed in your garage. This is not like an interior that you're trying to make super nice. Now, when you upgrade your electricity, you always want to think about potential future growth. So when I talked to my electrician, I said, here's the thing. I want, for instance, a 120 volt 20 amp that's hanging from the ceiling so that I can have a drop down cord. I knew that I wanted a drop down where I was going to have my joiner and planer, but then I also thought ahead to my dust collector. So I had him run, at the time, even though I didn't own it, a 20 amp 220 volt line over so that I could get the dust collector wired in when I was ready to do that. So as you're making your decisions, talk to your electrician, talk to them about what you need, what you're running, and what you may want to upgrade to in the future. And this is a great time, again, to add 220 if you haven't. Now, do you need 220 to do woodworking? Absolutely not. A lot of people do great woodworking without having 220 circuits, but if you're thinking about upgrading some of the bigger tools, you're gonna want that 220. So we upgraded our lights, we've upgraded our electricity, and now the third thing is the dust collector. Now, I'm sure people will argue with me about this one a little bit and have different thoughts and feelings. Your health is super important, and as I talked about in my review of this dust collector, there have been a bunch of medical studies that show the problems with long-term exposure to wood dust. You can get allergies, and if you've been woodworking long enough, you've heard of somebody who's developed an allergy, for instance, that is severe enough that they can't keep woodworking. Things like chronic issues with your sinuses, ear problems, and even COPD and emphysema potentially with long-term exposure to small wood dust particles. And quite frankly, it's something that a lot of us in the garage woodworking community don't give a lot of thought to. All of us at one point or another have tried to make a shop vac be our main dust collector. When I had my Wen contractor table saw, a shop vac is what did the dust collection for that, and it was terrible. It constantly got clogged, and when your dust collection stinks, you wind up not using your dust collection. More often than not, when I ran that table saw, I didn't even bother connecting it because I knew I was going to have to deal with the clog, and I didn't have the time to deal with that. Now, do you need to upgrade to a big honkin' 220 dust collector like this? Absolutely not. I'm a big fan of Oneida. It's made in the USA. They have great customer service, and I have loved my Oneida dust collector. And what's great about them is you can give them a call and say, hey, I work out of a garage. I'm interested in upgrading my dust collection. Can we go through your dust collectors? They'll ask you all sorts of questions that are really important to getting good dust collection. What kind of machines do you have? How big are the outlets on those machines? What are the CFM requirements on those machines? Do you ever run more than one machine at once? Do you have a drum sander, for instance, that has dual dust ports, or do you have a small drum sander with one dust port? Do you want to have something that's portable, or do you want to have something that's fixed? And do you want to pipe in your dust collection, or are you going to be relying on flex hose that you connect or disconnect from your tool? Most reputable companies who sell dust collectors will have options for all of these different scenarios, and you can go all the way from something like the Oneida Mini Gorilla to their Supercell, all the way to something like this V system, which is the biggest it gets for personal dust collectors before you hit that industrial level when it comes to the Oneida system. Now, do you need a dust collector in place before you buy a bunch of tools? Absolutely not, and that's why I put this in position number 3. If you don't have a table saw or you don't have milling equipment, you may not need to upgrade to a big expensive dust collector at that point. But if you're at the point where you're thinking to yourself, I have a 15-inch planer, but I could upgrade to a 20. I would much rather upgrade and invest money in the dust collection before investing in a tool like that. If you already have equipment, for instance, a table saw, a joiner, or a planer, that does 90% or more of the work that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, then it's time to start thinking about your health versus a tool that's going to marginally help you in certain situations. So seriously, think about upgrading your dust collector. Now, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Is my list stupid? Do you have other things that you think are more important upgrades to make to your shop? Let me know down in the comments along with any other comments, concerns, or questions that you have. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not, and hit the notification bell if you'd like to receive notifications the minute that my videos come out. Thank you guys for checking it out. We'll see you in the next one, and until then, get out there and enjoy your garage.